Welcome back to the shop, my friends. Steve here at SKS Props, and this is part 1 in how to make a Punisher Tactical Armored Vest. And the whole reason I broke this up into 2 parts is because there's a lot going on. Needless to say, there's a ton of detail on this thing, and I wanted people to have an opportunity to get a jump start on the front. The second part to that is the back's not quite done yet, and that's because I was out at Planet Comic-Con talking to thousands of people, so I lost a couple days in the shop, but I was able to paint the skull while I was out there. Now, just like all the rest of my builds, this vest is made completely out of my HD foam, and if you like these build videos, you like the free templates, and yes, there is a free template for this available over on my website, then by all means go through the links that are in the description section and those that are on my site and pick up some amazing HD foam. So, I want to show you what it takes to put this Punisher vest together. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with the top of the chest, where part A will be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam. Part B is going to make up a raised chest detail. This template is also going to be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam. Parts C and D will make up the middle of the abdomen. These are going to be traced and cut out of some 4mm foam. Now, if you would like to extend or decrease the length of the chest armor, these are the pieces that you would need to modify. Parts E and F will make up the eyes on either side of the chest armor. These pieces will also be layered, and they're going to be traced and cut out of some 4mm foam. Part G will start to define the sides of the chest armor. The very end of this is where you can increase or decrease the size depending on how far you want the chest armor to wrap around your body. It's easier to do a rough cut and then clean up this inside corner with my rotary tool. Just like the other sections, part H is going to be layered on top. Once this piece has been glued into place, we'll make sure that the foam will keep this rounded shape. Here you can see how all the sections will be assembled to make the final chest armor. This time around I felt it would be easier to cut out all the pieces at once, refine them, and then assemble them one at a time. After all the edges have been slightly rounded over with my rotary tool, then I can apply a little bit of heat with my heat gun. Using a pencil I mark where part A will eventually be glued onto part D. I'm going to start with the midsection where part D can be glued onto part C using some Bob Smith superglue. Now notice that I cut part D in half, so this piece has a little bit of flex. With this part assembled, part A can now be glued on top. I lightly mark placement of the raised chest details with a pencil. Now while gluing part B down, it's very important that I start in the middle and then work my way to the outside. This will allow me to slightly round over part A to give it this gradual curve. Part I is going to make up a support strip underneath. This is going to be traced and cut out of some 4mm foam. And notice that this piece has a notch that's going to intersect with the top of part D. I trim away any excess foam, leaving about a ½ inch on either side before I glue this piece into place. Having the understructure of the part I piece is important because this is what part E will attach to. The eyes will have a slight overlap onto part D. And just like the top of the chest, the middle of this piece is glued first, and then slowly adhered down while the chest is curved. The part F raised eye detail can now be glued on top, once again making sure to start in the middle and then work my way to the outside. Now I can start working on the lower abdomen where parts G and H will need to be glued together. I mark placement with a pencil and I add adhesive, but only in the middle. I don't add any glue to the outside sections at this point in time. The lower line of part H is going to line up with the bottom of the eye. That makes it easy to visually cut part C in half and see exactly where this piece needs to line up. By not having part H as all one piece, you can see where it has a decent amount of flex to wrap around the body. Now I can start to glue parts G and H to the back side of part E. You can see why I waited to do this, so all these pieces would be glued together one step after the other. This allows the entire side of the chest armor to conform properly. The inner corners of part E can now be glued down to give it a more seamless look. Part J is going to make up the bulk of the side armor, and this is going to be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam. And as you can see, I have some basic lines for placement on my template, but you may need to change those for yours. I go ahead and use my rotary tool to round over the edges, and then I can add a little bit of heat to help manipulate the shape. Just like part G and H, I'm just going to be adding adhesive in the middle for right now. And that's because depending on how you glue the upper section, you can manipulate the armor to have the abdomen curve in, or glue it lower to make the chest armor more flat. It's completely up to you and the shape and size of your body. Once I'm satisfied with the look of mine, I can apply adhesive to the backside and glue part J into place. And as you can see in the video, I have approximately 2 inches of exposed foam on the sides. But that's where having modular shapes makes it a lot easier for the armor to conform to you. On my vest, because I am a little shorter, I decided to cut off a little bit of material along the bottom. This is eventually where the teeth will go. And to add some additional visual interest here, I'm going to glue down part K, which is also going to be traced and cut out of some 4mm foam. I also glue a small strip of 2mm foam to the backside seam. The teeth will be made up of part L, and I'm going to need 4 of these cut out of 4mm foam. Now to make sure that they don't distort over time, I'm going to glue some styrene to the back side. This is some really thin plastic sheeting, and you can even use for sale signs from the hardware store. Adhesive can now be added to the teeth, and they can be evenly spaced. I personally found it easier to work from the outside in. Another armor section added to the lower sides is going to be part M. This is also going to be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam, marking approximate placement with a pencil. Of course, you don't have to follow my design. You could change any of these sections for a unique look for your armor. There are 2 detail straps that wrap around the outside of part F. So part N is going to be traced and cut out of some 4mm foam 2 times. These simple straps are rounded over with a rotary tool before being glued into place. Because I'm building this as I go, I decided an additional support behind the teeth might be a good idea. So part O is going to be traced and cut out of some 4mm foam and glued behind. Just like before, some 2mm foam is going to be glued into place to reinforce this seam. To help round over the top of the chest, parts G and H can now be glued to the back of part A while the foam is rounded over. It's time to start fabricating the front of the shoulder straps. These will be made out of part P, which will be traced and cut out of some 4mm foam 2 times. Now notice that I marked a faint line with a pencil where it's going to line up with the top of the chest. There's a small raised detail area on these as well, and that's going to be made up of part Q. One thing I like is that this tiered effect works throughout this entire chest armor build, so it gives it one nice cohesive look. Now these will eventually have additional straps added to them in the part 2 video. Using some references, I start to mark the placement of the bullet holes. Now placement of these does not need to be perfect, and in fact add as much battle damage or as little as you see fit. I'm just trying to match some of the references that I found from the show or photos that I took of the screen. I like to make stuff as screen accurate as possible, but that's how I enjoy building. Using a heat tool with a blunt tip, I can now start to fabricate the bullet holes. The way I do this is I insert the tool, and then I slowly go around and open the hole a little bit more until I get the correct diameter. And you can see that smoke, which means you always want to be wearing your respirator when doing this process. Using my rotary tool, I was able to remove some additional foam from around the holes, as well as add more battle damage throughout the armor. Now in the show, this vest is made of cloth, so it does have a very ragged look around the bullet holes. To simulate this look, I use a wire brush to start to fray the foam around these areas. The wires on the brush gives it a much more random appearance than if I was just to use a rotary tool on its own. And after some heat is added, all these little bits of foam will cauterize and solidify, giving it a really cool weathered look. Now it's time to prime the armor, and I'm going to apply 2 light coats of Plasti-Dip. After that's cured, on top of this I'm going to add some Valspar Flat. This preps the surface for the acrylics that I'm going to add, the main color being Liquitex Mars Black. This pigment will be applied to the chest armor with a large mop brush over the entire piece. And this is important because any cleanup I do later on with smaller brushes will match this pigment's color and sheen. Before I start to paint the skull, I would like to go ahead and add on the nylon webbing. There will be 2 straps on either side of the armor that are going to be made out of some 1-inch nylon and tri-glides. Again, using my screen references, I look for approximate placement before cutting the nylon to length and gluing the straps together. The strap that will attach in the middle is approximately 6 inches long, but then will be glued together. The longer strap that wraps around to the outside is approximately 18 inches in length. But again, these sizes are based off of my armor, so your size may vary. Once I'm okay with placement, I mark it with a pencil, and then I use a well-sharpened hobby blade to cut a slit through the foam. The strap can then be inserted, and this will eventually be glued to the back side. Since that one worked out and it looks good, I go ahead and I prep the other 3 straps. The same process is used to attach the straps on this side, and some hot glue can be used to secure the nylon to the back side of the chest piece. Just like the foam, the longer nylon strap can be glued to the back side while the chest piece is curved. Now there is going to be a 2-inch nylon section in between these straps, so I went ahead and cut some poster board to give myself a reference. That way I could space the straps on the top and bottom evenly. Cutting into the foam and using additional hot glue, these straps can also be adhered to the chest armor. Now this 2-inch section is for shotgun shells, so I'm going to need to make my own custom straps. It'll be made up of 2 layers, the bottom layer being approximately 9 inches in length. This will give me enough material for it to be inserted into the chest and wrap around. To simulate the size of the shotgun shells, I'm going to be using a 3/4 inch wooden dowel. The nylon is wrapped around this, and then the dowel can be removed. I then hold the nylon while the spacer is glued into place using some Surebond or hot glue. Now I will say that this was a time-consuming process, but I think the end results turned out great. You could of course go the extra step and sew these instead of using hot glue, but because I'm doing this for demonstration and cosplay purposes, I didn't really feel that that was necessary. Now during the build process I ended up making 6 loops for each side, but I ended up removing the last one and gluing the nylon flat. 5 loops turned out to work great for each side. Just like the other straps, placement is marked and hobby knife is once again used to cut all the way through the foam. Hot glue could then be added to the inside of the chest. Now instead of having this nylon wrap around, I decided to cut it at an angle to match the contour of the side of the chest. Then I was just able to add hot glue to the back side of this piece and then glue it into place. Again, for this application, I'm not really worried about this nylon pulling away, it should be fine. I did get enough of the chest armor done that I could paint the skull as a live demo for my booth at Planet Comic-Con. I started by sketching out some base proportions onto the chest using some chalk, that way water would be an easy cleanup. Using Liquitex heavy body parchment, I started to paint in some basic shapes. Adding less water to the paint allowed me to start adding textures to the surface. This will help me better match the screen use vest as seen in the show. Every layer is going to be adding less and less water, and I'm definitely getting a lot more deliberate with my individual paint strokes. If you're too timid in this process, it could make the brushstrokes appear muddy, and it won't have that same kind of organic texture. And this is why I cover the entire surface with Mars Black. Now I can start cleaning up edges and adding cracks, but because it's all Mars Black, it blends into the background. Another cool way to get these types of textures is to not use the tip of the brush, but to use the side. You'll technically have less control, but it will create textures that you couldn't get otherwise. And another thing, don't be afraid to use your hands to help feather these pigments out. Sometimes your fingerprints work just as good as a brush. Now granted, I was at a Comic-Con for 2 days, talking to several thousand people behind my booth, so I had a lot of additional time to focus on some of the minute details that match the screen. But just like the building process, this is how I enjoy crafting, so don't feel that you have to do this exactly like I did. I mean, heck, in the show, Frank apparently got this look by 2 sprays of a spray can, and I spent 5 to 6 hours working on it. Now, I'll try to include a basic stencil setup with the template, but you can always freeze frame this video to see where I'm adding additional highlights. So you all can see what it takes to put together the front of the Punisher vest, and be sure to swing back by for part 2, where we're going to be making the shoulder straps and the back. And if you are building any of my builds or utilizing some HD foam, be sure to tag me at SKSProps on Twitter and Instagram, because I want to see your creations. Until next time, build your best with the best HD foam.